It's really rare that you get conditions as incredible as this. Even better when you've got a fantastic wreck to dive. Hi, this is Dom Robinson, and welcome to my Deep Wreck Diver channel. Today, you're going to be following me as I dive the wreck of the U-1021, a World War II German submarine that vanished in March 1945 with the loss of all her crew and was only discovered about 15 years ago. It's a brilliant dive and one that's on the bucket list of most divers in this part of the world as they kind of start their journey into technical diving. The story of how U-1021 was lured to its doom in an underwater minefield is also fascinating and one that I'll be covering during the dive. So here we are on the boat, just getting ready. You can see how great the conditions are. That's my buddy, Scott, off to the right-hand side. In front of me there is Fran. There's not particularly much room on this boat, so because there's quite a long window of slack, what we're doing is the first divers, which is Scott and me, are being helped to get in the water by the next divers, which is Fran there. You can see it's such a lovely day. She's not even in a dry suit yet, but she's helping me get our stages on, which is great of her. So I'm pretty much the only person on the boat, I think, who's dived the U-1021 before. And you can look around at the others there, and there's a huge level of excitement. Everybody knows how great this wreck is. We all know that the visibility is going to be fantastic, and we're all just keen as anything to get in the water. But, you know, everybody's taking the time. Everyone's getting all their gear sorted. You can see there I am on the left, looking out. You know, look how flat that is. It is, I mean, you just don't get days that are any better than this. So it's just lovely. And there, off to my left-hand side, you can see there's the shot line, and the skipper's going to drop me up current of it. There you go. You can see I'm in, and I'm going to look back and have a look at the boat there. You can see it's not the world's biggest boat. This was Saxon Mist, operated by Dive Newquay out of Newquay on the North Cornish coast. Really sadly not running anymore. Unfortunately, that boat, last time I saw it, was out of the water up on chocks, and I believe it's sold off. It may even have been scrapped. Really sad, because it was a good boat for this kind of thing, but hey, that's life. That's what happens. This dive is from quite a while ago now. It's from 2021, so you know, just I think in that period after COVID, when the world was slowly returning to normal, and we were able to get out and do this sort of thing again. So you can see I'm in the water, and the skipper has dropped me up current. There's not much current, but I'm slowly drifting onto the shot line. You can see it there just in front of me. Meantime, I'm just having a look down and checking everything's okay with my gear, making sure that the rebreather's performing correctly, all that kind of stuff. My buddy Scott is just behind me. There you go. You just had a brief glimpse of him. The more observant of you will notice that I don't have my trademark signature yellow gloves on. Don't know why I didn't have them on for this dive. Maybe I run out or something like that. Who knows? But you can see I've got underwater here, and I'm still drifting. And there I am onto the shot. You can see that this is a top tension shot system. So the reason there's two ropes is the one that I'm about to hold on, the one that's diagonal. That's the one that's going down to the wreck. The other one, the one that's vertical, has got a weight on the end of it. And the idea is that is kind of counteracts the current to try and keep the shot a bit more vertical. You know, they work relatively well. Don't tend to be used a lot for really deep diving. But hey, this is a 52-ish meter dive. So those of you who've seen some of my other videos will have heard me refer to sort of my kind of view that 60 metres is where technical diving starts. Now, obviously, that's quite a contentious point. Plenty of other people will say, no, it's 40 metres, no, it's 50 metres. Obviously, they're all wrong, but there's no doubt that this area, this dive, 50 to 60 metres, is definitely in a kind of grey zone. And, you know, a lot of people, including myself, did this as one of their first kind of deeper trimix dives. So it is a nice depth. You get a decent bottom time. You end up having to do a reasonable amount of deco. So it is really nice as in that kind of transition period, I would say. Anyway, there's a good discussion point. I look forward to hearing some more about it in the comments. So, U-1021, what is it? Well, it's a Type 7C World War II German submarine, and these were the workhorse of the German Navy in the Second World War. They built a huge number of these submarines, something over 700 of them, and also vast numbers of them were sunk as well. You know, the life expectancy of guys on these submarines was really, really poor. Now, the interesting thing about this type of submarine is there is still one that you can go and visit, and this photo is of the U-995, which is almost identical to the U-1021. It's above water in Germany. You can go and visit it. You can go inside it. You can go and have a look around. I've not done that, but you know, I would love to do so. The other thing, if you're interested in these kind of submarines, I'd really encourage you to read a book called Iron Coffins. It's written by one of the few German submarine commanders who survived all the way through the war in submarines. It's an absolutely incredible account of what it was like on board these things, and how the war changed and how his thoughts about his own life and all those kind of things changed. It is just a brilliant book. So on the dive, though, you can see I've got to you can see the bottom below me there. You can see I'm just putting my strobe on at the moment. You can also see the shot is not quite on the wreck. You can see the wreck just through the gloom there. And what's also really obvious is that's the underneath of the wreck. Now, that's always a bit disappointing. You'd much prefer the shot to be on the other side where all the stuff is. But hey, I'm actually really pleased that it is on this side. And the reason I'm really pleased that it's on this side is one of the things I wanted to do on this dive is find the thing that sunk this submarine. It is known to be here, and I'm aware of it. I know roughly where it is. So what I'm going to be doing is looking for it. And the thing that sunk this submarine was a British mine. I've already shown you a picture of that Type 17 mine. These things were in really widespread use, and sunk loads and loads of submarines. But the interesting thing about them is how they worked, or one of the interesting things about them is how they worked, is they were mounted on a trolley, and they were pushed off the back of a ship on the trolley, and they would then sit on when they got to the depth on the seabed, they would release a rope or a chain that would hold the sea mine at a certain depth above the bottom. So I don't know if you can see in front of me here, but on the seabed there is a metal object surrounded by rocks, and that metal object is the trolley from the Mark 17 mine that sunk the U-1021. It doesn't look like very much when you consider the size of the submarine that's just next to it, but there would have been hundreds of these mines in this area. Each one of these mines could have up to 500 pounds of amatol, so high explosive inside them. And as you can see, just one, as you'll see later on in this video, just one mine was enough to blow the front off the U-1021 and kill everybody on board. 43 men lost their lives when the U-1021 was hit that mine. So, incredibly effective weapon. You could put them down, obviously leave them. They'd be there for years if that's what you wanted, and deny the area to the enemy. So, in the particular case of the U-1021, this was, as I've already said, right at the end of the Second World War. So it's not entirely known when the U-1021 did hit this mine. It's generally believed to be the 14th of March, 1945. And if you think Hitler committed suicide on the 30th of April, 1945, so only a month after this submarine was sunk, it's it shows just how close to the end of the Second World War this was. And later on, I'm going to show you the list of the casualties on this submarine. And you look at their ages, and then they're all 19 or 20 or 21. The oldest person on board this submarine was 30 years old, but most of them were really, very, very young men. I mean, really, not much off boys. And this was, if you read Iron Coffins, you know that at this point in time, the submariners, the German submariners, knew that going out on these kind of missions was not far off suicidal. And so, you wonder what it was like for the people, the boys, the men who took this submarine out, knowing that the chances of them coming back was really, really small. I guess they probably saw it as themselves doing their duty. I mean, these guys, if you think about it, 21 years old, so they would have, or 19 years old, they'd have probably spent most of their life living under the Nazi regime, so would have had all the propaganda and all that kind of stuff. So maybe they thought they were, doing their bit. They thought it was important. Whatever. They ended up dying here. This submarine never sunk any ships. As far as we can tell, it never even attacked any other ships. It simply left Germany. It did its workup training in late 1944. It left Germany in 1945. Sailed, really, really close to the English coastline. And once again, if you read Ian Coffin's book, you will know that there's one of the chapters towards the end of it is called Hell Above, which is him just saying that the entire air above them, whenever they surfaced, there was just planes everywhere. It was just a horrendous time for the German submarines. And these type of submarines were old designs. They had newer submarines coming out, but they weren't ready. So they were just sending guys out in these old submarines to do the best they can, and in the case of this one, all to die. Now this bit here, this is the break in the submarine. This is obviously really close to where I've seen that trolley for the mine, and you can see here the damage caused to the submarine where that explosion there has blown all that bit in there. It's ripped off the bow that I'm going to show you in a second. And as you can see here, you can actually look inside. You can see the twisted metal. And obviously, anybody who is in this part of the submarine, they're dead. The instant it hit that mine, goes off, they're all dead. The force of the explosion, or the fact they're 50 odd meters down, that is going to kill them. So there's no doubt about that. The people further down in the submarine, we're going to see some hatches. We're going to have a look inside it. And, I don't think it's as clear cut with those people. If you think about things like the Kursk, the famous Russian submarine that one of its own torpedoes blew up 20 odd years ago, and the guys survived in the back of that submarine for quite a long period of time. My gut feeling is there were the people in the submarine who survived that first explosion, and I'll show you more about that later on. But here I am just surveying the damage. This is the pressure hull here. So that's designed to withstand down to the maximum diving depth of this submarine, which was 230 meters. So, that's capable of withstanding an incredible amount of pressure. So it must have been really thick. And as you can see, it's just been ripped apart by the force of that explosion. I mean, you can look inside, you can see stuff in there. Some of that is brass. Some of it, this is up near the front of the submarine. So I guess you're into there would have been some crew quarters up here. There would have been the torpedo tubes. We're going to see a bit more of those in a minute. So this is it carried five torpedo tubes, 4 in the front, 1 at the back. And this is, there would have been spare torpedoes. There have been all sorts of bits and pieces in this area, and it's all just utterly shredded and ripped apart. Just shows you, I think, the force of the explosion. Now, the reason it's thought that this submarine was destroyed on the 14th of March is because there was a vessel in this area that reported an explosion or hearing an explosion on that date. Now, obviously, sea mines did occasionally explode for reasons other than hitting submarines, so it may have been something to do with that. But chances are it was the ship was hearing the strike on this submarine. So in front of me there, you can see that is the bow. That was the bit that's ripped off. I'm going to go and have a look at that now. You can see the torpedo tubes. You can also see some of the casing on the bow as well, which is relatively unusual. I mean, it's mainly the pressure hull that survives on submarines rather than the casing. Oh, you can see Scott's up there as well. Clearly, he's not as interested as I was in looking into that bit. So he's gone forward. And but what it does show is just how great the visibility is here. the other great thing about this dive is because of the depth. You can see here, most of the dive is actually shallower than 40 metres. It just means that there is, you've got an incredible amount of bottom time, so you can spend the time really getting to know the wreck. So you can see Scott's up here at the front. You can see there he's looking at the torpedo tubes. They're really clearly visible there. That kind of that rib thing. As I say, there will be 4 at the front of this submarine. You can see kind of the top 2 there. You can see the hydrofoils off to the left-hand side that would have been used to control the up and down. You can also even see right at the front of it there. You can actually see the casing with the bow, and you see Scott's got a couple of video lights there, which he's using to illuminate parts of the wreck, which is helping with the photography. We agreed we were going to do this. You can see I've got my camera. I've got my camera with me, and I got some brilliant photos of this dive, as you can probably imagine. I'm going to intersperse my video with a few every now and again. It just, fabulous conditions. The viz is good, and there's a whole load of ambient light getting down to the seabed. And the seabed, as you can see, is this lovely sand, and the sand is reflecting the light back. So it just makes for great conditions for taking videos and also taking photos as well. So, and Scott, because he's got those nice video lights, chucking a load of light on everything, it just helps. It makes everything a bit less green. So he's obviously pleased because I'm getting a load of photos of him, which is what he wants as well. But this iconic bow here, you don't always get to see this on submarine wrecks because obviously it's not the pressure hull, it is the casing, so it does rot away and vanish. You can see it started to rot away in quite large chunks of it. But to have this much of it here is still really nice. And you can see that looking through that hole on the left, you can see actually the door of one of the torpedo tubes. Almost certainly there will still be live torpedoes inside these torpedo tubes. That's how they carried them, and that's how they made sure they got as many on board. And this was the area in which the U-1021 was sent to operate. So no doubt they would have been cruising around looking for opportunities to sink some vessels. Fortunately for the vessels, they never managed it, and instead, and this is the really fascinating bit about this story, is that clearly by this time we'd cracked all the German codes. We were listening in on them, through Enigma and those kind of things. And what we became aware of is that the Germans thought that this area was clear of mines. So they'd either other vessels or whatever had reported that, or they'd got some intelligence or something like that. They believed this area was clear of mines. So we were aware that they were sending submarines into this area. So what we then did was we then sent mine layers out and laid several fields of mines in this area, so that the absolutely horrendous. If you were on board this submarine, you think you're going somewhere where there's no mines. All of a sudden, you get there, and I'm sure we've all watched the famous film Das Boot, and we've heard that awful sound of a mine chain or a mine dragging down the side of the submarine. Now, clearly we don't know if that is what happened to the U-1021, but you can imagine it might be. So all of a sudden there's kind of awful realisation that you're in a minefield, and then obviously the explosion, and then obviously what happens afterwards. Absolutely horrendous way to die. But this was war, and I guess that's what's happened. That's what happens. Now, Scott here in front of me, he, in his former life, he was a Navy submariner. He did 20 odd years in submarines. So for him, diving on this wreck is particularly poignant. He feels a kind of kinship with the people who were on board the submarine, the guys who died. So it is, I guess, nice for him, or interesting for him, to come and do this dive. So you can see what we're doing here is we're heading back along the submarine. So we've been to the bow, we're heading forward, and you can see there, just coming up out of the gloom there, is the conning tower. Clearly, that is a really iconic part of any submarine. Now, interestingly enough, when the submarines in the Second World War were first built, They all had guns mounted ahead of the conning tower, and you can see there is no gun on this submarine. And the reason is that halfway through the Second World War, the Germans realised that using a gun on a submarine was no longer a sensible thing to do. So, the ships were defensively armed. There was loads of planes. There was loads of destroyers. So all of a sudden, a submarine being on the surface and trying to fight was a really bad idea. So they removed all the guns, and the only guns that were left on submarines by this point were anti-aircraft guns. And when we go around the other side of the conning tower, you will see where they would have been mounted. And one of the mounts, at least one of the mounts, is still on the seabed. So we'll see that in a moment. But before that, obviously, the conning tower, one of the most interesting parts of any submarine. All sorts of bits and pieces here, and you can see this is this is only the pressure hull. The actual casing, so the bit that gave submarines often or conning towers often a very distinctive shape, that is all in that mess of stuff that's on the seabed down there, or has rotted away. So what you can see here is the pressure hull, and you can see in particular what you can see is the periscopes. And this type of submarine would have had two main periscopes. The one at the back, so the aft one, is the attack periscope. So that one had the really detailed high magnification optics on it. It went up further than the other one, and that's the one, it was the smallest one. That was the one that they would use for launching the torpedoes. The other one was more of a sort of wider field, and that one was used for observation, so it would be used for target acquisition, also for checking that everything was clear before they surfaced. The other thing that I'm just going over the top of, the round thing, that's a radio direction finding antenna, so they would use that for trying to acquire targets. They would listen in for radio signals and those kind of things. So just in front of me there is actually one of the periscopes. You can see, I think I'm probably going to go in. Yeah, there I am. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to rub the glass. So that's the observation periscope. And you can see that absolutely incredibly that the glass is still intact. I always think that looks a bit like the Eye of Sauron. And you see quite a lot of people have put photos of the U-1021 online. And that kind of Eye of Sauron photo is one that's really well known. So you can see, so this is the observation periscope. Or periscope number 1, depending on your terminology. Periscope number 2, which is the one behind it, is the attack periscope, and that's the one that would have had the better optics. As you can see, it's smaller as well, so that it would have created less wake, so therefore less likely to be observed, etc. Now, the other really interesting thing about this submarine is, although it was an old model, an old type of submarine, it had a couple of things on board it that made it really interesting. One of the things it had on board was a snorkel, and I don't really spend much time looking at the snorkel, which is kind of a bit foolish, because it is something that's really interesting about this wreck, and it's also one of the things that helped identify it. But the purpose of a snorkel was to allow the submarine to charge its electric batteries whilst underwater. Up until the snorkel, submarines would have to come up to surface, run their diesel engines, charge the batteries, and then go underwater. So the snorkel is actually to the front of the conning tower on the port side, so on the side that's nearest the seabed. You can just about see the bottom of it, and what would happen is that would be the submarine would come up relatively shallow. They would raise that above the water level, and it would allow air to be brought into the submarine, into the diesel engine, and exhaust fumes to be exhausted as well, so that they could run the diesel engines underwater. That meant they didn't have to surface. And by the latter stages of the Second World War, any time a submarine was on the surface, it was really dangerous for them. We, the Allies, we had lots of radar, we had aircraft with radar fitted, we had aircraft with very powerful searchlights so they could operate at night. We had homing torpedoes. We had all sorts of things that just made it really, really difficult for submarines. So the snorkel, by allowing them to charge their batteries underwater, was a really important capability for them. And going back to iron coffins again, So if you read the book Iron Coffins, the guy who wrote it gets absolutely livid that his submarine is not fitted with a snorkel, and he goes to great lengths to try and find one and try and get one fitted to his submarine, because he understands how important they are to the life expectancy of his vessel and his comrades. So what we're doing here is, you've seen that Scott is putting the video lights on the seabed, and what he's actually trying to do is angle those up so that they angle up onto the conning tower to get a better picture. Now the reality is there's so much light down here that those video lights are just not making any difference, and you can see there, I mean, they're just rubbish, and it's because there's already so much light. All they're doing is really adding a bit of colour to that very small amount of the wreck, so a bit pointless really. So having realised it's all a bit pointless, I'm going to go in, I'm going to pick them up, and I think turn them off. You can also see that the first of the other divers are in the water, and they're heading the other way down the wreck. I mean, you just see there how good the visibility is. Those guys are clearly, I mean, they've got to be 20 odd metres away from us. We can see their torches. Just shows how good conditions are. Now, some of these other divers, they knew I had a camera. Not everyone else had a camera, so they were, or not many other people had a camera. So one of the things they were really keen to do is to get a photo on this wreck. And I did say to them, look, if I see you down there, I will absolutely get some photos of you, especially because the conditions are so great and all those kind of things. So this is the two Scotts. This is George Scott and Mark Scott, as opposed to the third Scott who I'm diving with. Here they come. They're obviously they're trying to get a lovely position, looking really good in the water. So if you ever see a cameraman around and your trim's awful, or you're not in a great underwater position, then strongly advise you to kind of get it sorted. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a permanent record of you looking a bit rubbish underwater. So this bit here, you can see all this stuff that's on the seabed. This is the remains, really, of the casing to the aft of the conning tower, and this is where the guns are. This is where the anti-aircraft guns are. And that thing in front of me, the big thing, is one of the mounts. But these are the two divers that I promised photos to. So as you can see there, I'm directing him into position, and saying, look, I'm going to get some photos of you. So the other thing you can see about this diver is they've got my yellow gloves. So at least I know where they are. Now it's one of those things. A few other people have, I'm not going to say copied me, but certainly do the same as me in terms of wearing yellow gloves. And it does mean that you can always see hand signals and those kind of things. You can see there, it just shows how good they are, how much they stand out. So this diver's obviously posing really nicely in front of the conning tower, and that's going to make a great photo. In fact, a load of these guys, I think, used the photos I got of them. They put on their profile pictures and those kind of things. In fact, there you go. You can see the first diver who went past me. He's keen to be in on the action as well. So both of them are there. The other top tip, if you've been photographed, is this: what I'm telling the diver: don't point your torch at the cameraman. It's rubbish. You get rubbish photos and all those things. What you want to do is point it at something interesting near you, so that you can illuminate it. So that's what I've done. I think somebody's videoing me, so they're videoing me taking photos of other divers. So that's all very nice. In fact, I think that's Kev there with the blue G box. So they've all poked off, which is quite nice, because I want to get back. And one of the other things I said to myself I was going to do is look in this area here and try to actually find the gun. So this submarine should have had 3 anti-aircraft guns, a 37mm, so reasonable size weapon there, and 2 20mm. So those are kind of just big machine guns. And these were actually really powerful anti-aircraft weapons. And there's quite a lot of records of submarines in this kind of era engaging aircraft and shooting them down. And there's also quite a lot of records of submarines sinking U-boats as well. But I think the important thing is you might assume that it would be an unequal fight, that an aircraft or several aircraft would easily be able to sink a submarine, and that absolutely wasn't the case. These were good weapons. The guys who were using them, inflicted a fairly heavy toll of casualties on the on aircraft. So it was an interesting time. What's not quite so interesting is that all of a sudden now a beautiful, peaceful dive on this wreck has suddenly become... there's divers everywhere. And to make matters even worse, there's actually a diver over there who is on open circuit. Now, that's really rare on any of the kind of deeper dives. So he's obviously... it's really expensive for him. He's on some sort of trimix mixture. He's probably got twin 12s and a 50% or maybe an 80% deco gas. So it's a big expensive dive for him. Also, obviously, making it really noisy with all those nasty bubbles. But no, it's really uncommon to see open circuit divers diving on trimix doing this kind of stuff. So I've certainly, in the last 5 years, I've never seen an open circuit diver diving deeper than this kind of depth. So what you can see here, though, is that I'm starting to go past the conning tower and head towards the stern of the boat. As I go down, you can see there's this kind of big metal tube on the top of the pressure hull, and that is one of the intakes is the intake for the diesel engines. So that came up just behind the conning tower, and normally that's where the air intake would be. Clearly, with a snorkel, that's then moved and pushed up high. So, but that's the air intake. So in the submarine where we are now, that is we're into the engine area here. Now, the other thing that's going on there is the diver in front of me. You can see he's looking through that big hole, and that's a hatch. Now, the interesting thing about the hatches is we've seen 3 hatches on this submarine so far. There was one forward of the conning tower. There's one on the top of the conning tower, and there's this one here. So both the one on the conning tower and this one here are both open. So you would imagine that this submarine is cruising along at maybe 30 meters. It's all the hatches would be closed. It hits the mine. The mine blows out the front of the vessel, kills everyone on there. So how did the hatches get opened? Now, that's clearly a hatch from the one above me that's on the seabed. So somehow that hatch has ended up on the seabed. How did that happen? Well, I guess there's a couple of different theories. One theory is that maybe the force of the explosion blew the hatches off and blew them open, and that's how come they ended up on the seabed. Now, I'll be honest, I don't buy that, because to get from the front of a submarine to the back of the submarine, it's got to go through all sorts of compartments and all sorts of potentially watertight doors and various other bits and pieces that, for me, would reduce the force of the explosion by the time it got all the way down to this end of the submarine. And then what it's got to do is overcome the water pressure outside to blow, and, the actual strength of the hatch to blow it out. I just don't see that happening. But, I just can't believe there's enough pressure in it. So for me, what's happened here is that this hatch has been opened by people inside the submarine, and therefore I think that people survived the explosion, in the conning tower, survived the explosion in this part of the submarine, and they've tried to escape from the submarine, and they've opened this hatch, and therefore the hatch has been open and has then been, ripped off by something, whether it was fishing, whether it was natural decay of time, I don't know, but it's been ripped open, and that's how come it's ended up on the seabed. So, my belief, therefore, is that some guys survived and some guys potentially got out of the submarine and were on the surface, potentially. Now, this submarine is quite a long way offshore, maybe 10 miles offshore, and therefore to get from where it was to the shore, that's going to be really difficult, especially in March when the water's at its coldest. So what you can see here is I'm looking inside this hatch, and it's difficult to see in this video, but I'm pretty convinced that when I looked in there, I could see. Well, you can see there's a door. Clearly, there's a hatch of some sort. Whether that is, that hatch is not where it would have been. Maybe that hatch is evidence of it. Being that the explosion travelling through the submarine, and that hatch has been blown off, and that's why it's on. In the angle it is. Sorry, the other thing that I forgot to say that I thought was in there was I think you can see bits of rubber. And for me those are part of some sort of submarine escape kit. So I think this was part of the procedure for, this was acknowledged as an escape hatch for submariners. So whether that's just kit that was in that area because that's where people expected to escape from, whether that's evidence of people starting to prepare for an escape, I don't know. But, I kind of feel that there is evidence for this. So, but obviously no one's ever going to know. And there were no survivors from this submarine, so nobody got ashore. Nobody was picked up by any other vessels. I don't think even any bodies were found. So none of them washed ashore, or if they did, they weren't associated with this wreck. I don't know if submariners had on their clothing something that identified them as being from a particular submarine. So potentially there is a body somewhere that was found at some point and buried as maybe an unknown sailor or an unknown German sailor or something like that. But yeah, so when I dive this wreck though, what I'm thinking about is what it was like for those people who were on this submarine, these really, really young boys and young men, going to do their duty as they saw it, almost certainly in the expectation that they wouldn't survive, and then going through this horrendous experience, potentially of hearing the mine, then the mine explosion, potentially, escaping or trying to escape, and either being successful and dying on the surface or not being successful and drowning. Who knows? Absolutely horrendous, though. Going back to the wreck, you can see I've pretty much got up to the stern here, and you can also see just sort of there, just to the kind of left of the shot, that's the rear torpedo. And it's important to recognise that obviously these were weapons of war. These guys were coming out to do a job, and their job was to sink merchant ships. And particularly at the beginning of the Second World War, they sunk an awful lot of merchant ships. Famously, Winston Churchill said that the only thing that ever really worried him during the Second World War was the submarine threat. And in those kind of 1940, 1941, to a certain extent 1942, there was a stage when I think the Germans thought they were going to starve us. We thought maybe they were going to starve us. And, that's what this submarine was trying to achieve. Obviously, that moment had completely passed by 1945. This was a kind of last throw of the dice by the Germans. I mean, it wasn't even a throw of the dice because it was doomed to failure. The amount of kit that we were producing, the amount of tanks and planes and ships. Obviously, we'd landed in Normandy. The Russians or the Soviets, I guess, were advancing from the east, they'd smashed the German army, all sorts of places, Stalingrad, Kursk, all those incredible battles. So, the Germans were just really throwing people's lives away, really, I think, at this point. What you can see here, though, is you can see the propeller, one of the two propellers, very distinctive for particularly German submarines, is they have the propeller, and each propeller has its own rudder. So you can see the rudder off to the right-hand side there. British submarines tend to have two props, but only one rudder. Submarines this period, I don't know why that was, but anyway, if you're in any doubt this was German submarine, that shows that it is. So all the way through this video, you've seen me taking these photos, and at this point in my kind of diving career, I wasn't really interested in videoing. I was mainly interested in photography. So the fact that I had this video camera attached to my head was almost incidental. I never thought I would be doing this with this video. I never thought I'd be putting it online. But what I was keen to do was to get loads of good photos. and I was putting lots of my photos online at this particular point. So that's why you can see me doing this all the time. For those of you who are interested in cameras, what I've got is a Canon G7X Mark II in a Nauticam housing. So that's a small compact camera, and the housing costs far more than the camera, but actually it gives some really good results. And I've got a fisheye lens on the front of it. You probably saw that as well. Here you go, trying for a bit of an arty shot there through the kind of the bit between the prop and the rudder, and you can see there me giving Scott some directions. He's diving me quite a bit, so we've done a couple of trips to Malin Head together, and I always got photographs of him on those as well. And so he was very amenable to doing this kind of thing, which is really nice if you're a photographer. Having a willing model helps an awful lot, and Scott was very willing. He was great. Oh, he is great. Doesn't do so much of this kind of diving as he did once upon a time, which is a pity because he's a fantastic diver. I've loved diving with him, and I've done some great dives. Those of you, obviously, this is where one of the prop shaft comes out of the hull of the submarine, and you can see the submarine is really on its port side. Obviously, you've got those two belly tanks on submarines, and it does mean that submarines always end up on one side or the other. The other thing you might be interested in is what sort of video camera I'm using at the moment. So this is the I guess original Paralenz, the Dive Plus, which is great. Was a great underwater camera, underwater video camera. I had it strapped to the side of my mask, which does sometimes give you jerker vision, but I was fairly good at this point about keeping my movement of my head down to a minimum. Unfortunately, like an awful lot of power lenses, it did die in the end, and what got it were the rotary contacts. So that was really sad. And I then moved on to the Vaquita. So you'll see more of my modern videos are done with the Vaquitas. I've got both ones. I've got the original Vaquita and the Vaquita 2. And they're both great. The only thing with them is that they're heavier than the Dive Plus, so mounting them on a mask or mask strap is no longer really feasible. They're just a bit heavy, so that's why I dive with I mount them on a helmet now, and that works really well. So here I am coming back along the top of the submarine. You can see I'm quite a long time into my dive now, 40 odd minutes. And this is absolutely what you get at this time, at this depth rather, on a rebreather. You just get a whole ton of time. Lots of my other videos, you see me kind of rushing around, desperately trying to get things sorted in the, if it's a 100-meter dive, you've got 20 minutes on the bottom or maybe not even that long. And you've just got to try and cram as much as you can into that. That's why I use a scooter and all those kind of things. This dive, that's not the case. I'm just finning around, nice and leisurely, really enjoying myself, really chilled, taking loads of photos of whatever Scott is looking at there. In fact, those are that's the breather pipe that I mentioned earlier on. You can see there where it turns up at the back of the conning tower, and obviously there's a kind of intake on there, and the anti-aircraft guns would have been mounted on a platform in and around that area as well. So one of the problems with U-boats is always identifying them. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you will know some of them feature, attempts we've made to identify U-boats. So there were 3 Mark VII U-boats discovered round about the time that the U-1021 was, and there was a whole load of work that was put into trying to figure out which one was which. And there's a really interesting paper produced by Dr. Axel Nestle. And apologies if I've massacred his name there. It's a really interesting paper which analyses the 3 wrecks and explains why they were thought to be why they were identified as these ones. The paper's available on U-Boat.net, and it's also available on wreck sites. So if you are interested in it, it's really worth 5 or 10 minutes of your time just to have a read of it. And the kind of research that goes in to identify these things, absolutely incredible. So this was only really positively identified as a U-1021 in 2007. So, not that long ago. Up until that point, it'd been believed to have been sunk somewhere else. In fact, you can see here coming along the top of the sub, that's Fran. So clearly, having helped me with all my kit in the water, she's got herself sorted. She's the other diver with a camera on this dive. So she's you probably also saw she's got a video light in her hand as well. So she's coming along. She'll be getting some great photos. And Fran does take a really nice photo. So. I should probably try and get some off her, actually, because no doubt there is one of me somewhere kicking around. Meanwhile, here we are. We're back at the conning tower. That there you can see is the intake, probably the main air intake for the diesel engines. I've kind of talked about that already. And then the back of the conning tower, you can see, or I'm looking there, that's the attack periscope, the number 2, the one nearest to us, and the other one, the number 1, the observation one, is in front of that. Looking down on the seabed there, you can see, how good the visibility is. Also, something that might be a gun mount there, the kind of that cone-shaped thing. Also, obviously, the big pressure vessels. So that's got loads of compressed gas in, and they would have kept those charged. So if they ever needed to, so when they needed to get water out of the ballast tanks, that's where the compressed air would be used to do that. They're mounted on the outside of the submarine, and clearly those ones have through time have kind of rotted away and fallen off the side of the hull, and they're obviously lying there on the seabed. And there's a whole load of them. There's all sorts of other bits of pipe and machinery and all sorts of bits, and no doubt under there somewhere is a couple of anti-aircraft guns. And one of the things is, it's quite frustrating that I know they're there, but I've not been able to absolutely put my hand on one and go, yes, this is a gun. I'm sure it's buried under something somewhere, or possibly even might have been lifted by someone. That's a possibility as well. This submarine has been dived for 20 odd years, and people do like to lift odd things, even though they would have been they're steel, so they wouldn't have survived down here. They would have they'd be all rusty and horrible. But you've probably just saw a moment ago there, sort of 3 divers heading back towards the shot line, and I'm definitely starting to get to that point in the dive where I'm thinking, I've probably got about an hour of deco ahead of me. I need to be thinking how much deco do I want to do. And I think it's a long time ago, but I think on this dive we were given a total run time, and I think that the maximum run time the boat said was 2 hours. So you don't want to upset the skipper by breaking that. So you've got to keep an eye on it. There you go. You probably saw Scott was looking at me. He's giving me that look that you sometimes get from your buddy, which is like, "Come on, mate, it's time to head back to the shot." I think just before I do that, I want to have a quick look in here. I've not done it yet. This is I talked about those 3 hatches and the fact that 2 were open. So this is the one on the top of the conning tower. This would have gone down into the control room. This would have obviously been where the skipper and the lookouts came up and down and everything. And you can see there, there's a ladder, and there's obviously whatever that thing is there. That's and there's loads of wires and other boxes and all sorts of stuff in there. Wouldn't it be lovely to be able to get in there and go and have a look around? Unfortunately, that's just not happening with the amount of gear that I've got on me. So I can't imagine anybody has ever been in there. But there would be it would be lovely if we could. But hey, there we go. Maybe somebody will at some point invent a mini rebreather, or some sort of small thing that you can use to get yourself in there. But it is really tight. Looking in there, you can see the mechanism of the periscope. But that, for me, I think is me thinking this is time to say goodbye to the U-1021. And what a stunning dive it has been. How great it was. Brilliant conditions. Really fascinating wreck. Incredible story. Incredibly sad. Incredible time in world history. Second World War, all that change, all that innovation. The U-boat campaign went, first of all, the Germans were really successful. Then our countermeasures became really successful. And, if the war had carried on, the Germans had an entirely new generation of submarines, so-called Electra boots, that were going to come on, and that would have, I think, made a big impact as well. Fortunately, they were never able to get them to sea, and in any way that allowed them to be used. So that was great. Very fortunate, I guess. And you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm heading up, but as I'm going up, I'm taking some more photos, and you can see, how good these photos are. They really, I think, capture the atmosphere of, and also how good the conditions are. You can see the seabed here from easily 10, 11 metres above it. You can see there's a row of strobes rather. Even though the shot is quite a long way off the wreck, it's taken us, it's showing us the way home. So that's really nice. And if you haven't watched my strobe video, then I'd encourage you to do so. Shows exactly what's going on here. Shows the kind of strobes that we use, the kind of setups we use, how they get put on, how they get put off, and those kind of things. You can see here I'm actually a bit reluctant to leave the wreck. I'm not swimming particularly quickly back towards the shot line, and I think the reason is because I know that there's some other divers around, and I'm going to turn around in a bit and hopefully get a really nice photo of them. I'm also going down a bit, which is probably not great. I should try and be swimming along at that kind of 42 metre level. Maybe I feel that's what I need to do in order to get to my strobe. You probably remember from the descent that I was looking to go and find that trolley on which the Mark 17 mine was, and therefore, maybe I should have put my strobe up a bit higher. I was more, I guess, focused on the seabed than rather thinking I was going to be coming back over the top of the wreck. But hey, a couple of metres doesn't really make that much difference at this depth. A few more minutes doesn't make that much difference at this depth, because what it does to your deco time is really kind of minimal. I've been down here 50 odd minutes by this point, so it's a minute or so, not really going to change the price of fish. There you go, that's my strobe. Only got a single strobe at this point. You can see it's mine, it's got the green tape on it. That's how I recognise it. Other people, as you can see there, some guys put his name on with a bit of white tape. These things all work. And here you go, looking back at the wreck, that is just fantastic, isn't it? And there's those three divers. And you can see now I'm going to get my camera out and I'm going to take a photo of them. And it's a really nice photo. I'm really proud of it, because it's got the three divers, it's got the wreck in the background. That all comes out really nicely. So that's absolutely brilliant. Really pleased with this photo. And now there's a shot. There's Scott. He's got his strobe off, and we're going to be heading back up to the surface now. So I promised you this at the beginning of the dive. So these are the names of the people who died on the U-1021. And you can see there, it's also got their ages. And as you can see, there is a lot of very, very young people on this submarine. Boys, really, beginning of their lives and ended abruptly at the bottom of the sea in the remains of their particular iron coffin. So incredibly sad. All their names are on the U-boat memorial in Kiel. I've not been, but it's somewhere else that I would love to go to as well, to kind of, I guess, pay my respects. Didn't necessarily agree with the cause they were fighting for. In fact, didn't agree with the cause they were fighting for. It was vile, but I respect their bravery and the fact that they probably died a horrendous death. So the other thing people are always interested in is my decompression profile. So here I am. I've put it on the screen. You can see there, 50-ish meters. You can see the TTS there. Takes ages to build up at this depth because it's relatively shallow. But by the end of my dive, you can see there sort of 40 odd minutes, 45, 46, 47 minutes. I've got 58 minutes TTS, and up I come. And as I come up, you'll see what happens is I actually it abruptly changes from 58 to 52, and that 6-minute gain is when I switched my PO2 from 1.5 to from 1.3 to 1.5, and that just accelerated my deco a bit. And there you go. Rest of my deco takes me through to the end of the dive. Get up to surface. Total run time just under 2 hours. So that's the end of this dive. It was absolutely stunning. Great wreck, great dive, loads to see, fascinating story. And this is our dive team. You see the four of us who went out together, going from left to right. That's me, Scott, Big Jace, and then Fran on the right-hand side. You can see massive smiles on our face. We've had a great day. I hope you've enjoyed this video. And as always with any of my videos, please leave a comment. Tell me what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd like me to do next. Please give us a like if you feel like it. That would be great. Obviously, subscribe. Turn on your notifications would be awesome. And but most importantly, I hope you've enjoyed it. And I will look forward to seeing you on the next one.